Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason Howell and I have a great show planned for you. First, we stop in with iFixit's Shahram Mokhtari to talk about the brand new non-pro iPhones. These iPhones have quite the teardown surprise. Then Becca Ricks from the Mozilla Foundation stops by to talk about how those YouTube buttons that are supposed to tell YouTube that you don't like certain content and don't want to see it anymore, they may not work as we expect them to and may not be all that effective at all. Then we talk about a new headset to rival the Meta Quest 2 called the Pico Headset and round things out with an AI chatbot that uses humans to provide better responses. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 253, recorded Thursday, September 22nd, 2022.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by ClickUp, the productivity platform that'll save you 1 day a week on work, guaranteed. Use code TNW to get 15% off ClickUp's massive unlimited plan for a year, meaning you can start reclaiming your time for under $5 a month. Sign up today at clickup.com, but hurry, this offer ends soon.
And by Infrascale. Infrascale delivers industry-leading data protection through backup and disaster recovery. Visit infrascale.com/twit to sign up for a free demo and see how Infrascale protects your business today.
And by ZipRecruiter. Hiring, look, it's challenging, but there's one place where finding great candidates is easy. ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter finds and matches the right candidates for you, and our listeners can try it free today at ziprecruiter.com/TNW. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah. Sargent.
I'm the other guy, Jason Howell, and I got to tell you, sometimes it's a delight for me on this show because, Mikah, you focus so much on Apple hardware, right? That's obviously, you've got iOS today. You're a longtime iOS and iPhone user. I have all about Android, so I'm always, I feel like I end up in the Android bucket a lot of the time. So I actually like when we kind of change roles.
Mix
for a
it up,
change.
switch it up. Yeah.
Got to mix it up. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to start the show with exactly that. A brand new batch of iPhone hardware is out, of course, comes with the need to know exactly what might be hiding inside. Because you know how it rolls, right? We have new hardware, especially from a company like Apple. Very soon after, someone tears it open and tells you what's hiding inside for a number of reasons. Repairability, just curiosity, whatever it may be. And thankfully, we've got some pretty awesome people who seem to do this like clockwork, the folks at iFixit. And joining us to share what he and the team discovered lurking inside the new iPhone 14 devices is iFixit's Shahram Mokhtari. Welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to get you here. We got a lot to talk about because there are some interesting discoveries here when it comes to the iPhone 14 lineup. So thanks for hopping on. Before we get into the Pro and the Max, let's kind of go through the low, I don't know what you call them, the lower end or the more vanilla versions, the iPhone 14s. Scored pretty well when it comes to repairability, at least by comparison, which we'll get to that in a minute, the Pro and the Max. But it seems due to a redesign in how these devices are put together. Tell us a little bit about those changes.
Yeah, so spot on base model, vanilla iPhone 14, whatever you want to call it. The base model has been redesigned from the inside out. It's really quite interesting and impressive what they've done. What the engineers essentially did was they took the backplate that sits right at the back of the phone and they brought it a few millimeters into the case itself. Now, there are implications for this, but one of the key takeaways is that the phone is now more repairable because the backplate is removable, as is the front screen. It's a huge win for repair advocates.
Does that, when you say takes it in a little bit, does that mean, is that to say that there's more space on the inside as a result of this, or everything's pretty tightly compact regardless, it's just easier to access?
Oh, it's tightly compact. There should be less space in there, and that's what's interesting. Because they've taken the back plate, that's where the rear glass is adhered to. Because they've taken that back plate and brought it in some, there should be less space because you've also got a back plate to support the rear glass now. But the form factor is the same. You've got on the outside, this looks like any other iPhone 14 we've ever had, and that's what's truly impressive. They've done an excellent job with this design.
Have you seen a butterfly approach like this? Because I mean, I've seen a million, teardowns and everything, and usually it's held together by hot glue, accessible from one side. Obviously, makes if you've got a simple, well, I say simple with air quotes, but if you've got a simple, replacement of like a battery or a display, you have to go through all these layers in order to get there. Is this a first as far as this butterfly approach is concerned, based on what you've discovered at iFixit?
Personally, I've not seen anything like this before. It doesn't mean that there aren't any out there, but I haven't seen any. It is definitely among the major brands. It's not something we've seen. I'm an Android man myself. I've got a Note 9 here. I've done the screen replacement on that. And on the Androids, they are, you would remove the back of the phone to get into the internals. But the problem with the Android phones as with the iPhone 4, the last iPhone to open from the back was the iPhone 4. The screen does not separate from the frame because only one side of this phone separates. It is a huge engineering challenge to make both sides open up. What happens there, as with my iPhone, my Note 9, you waste the mid-frame when you replace the screen because the screen replacement, getting the screen off and getting a new screen onto the mid-frame is extremely difficult, especially with the curved edges. So you throw away the mid-frame. You buy the whole screen and the mid-frame as a unit, and then you put the internals inside the new mid-frame, and then you put the back on. That's how you do a screen replacement on an Android and on most other phones. So this is huge that they've done this.
Nice. All right. So then before we kind of turn our attention on how the Pro and the Max are actually incredibly different from what you're talking about, any other kind of discoveries pop up that you feel are pretty notable about what was hiding inside the baseline iPhone 14 models?
In the baseline model, I think it was just this. I say just this. It's right. such a challenge to do what they've done here. I think it's just become incredibly modular now. There is very little to waste when you perform a repair here, and that is the key aspect of the iPhone 14, the base model, the key improvement, and it's the key improvement we expect to see. I would love to see in every phone in their lineup next year, and there's really no reason why they shouldn't implement this. It's been so well received.
Yeah, I'd be really surprised. Well, and what occurs to me also right now is that Apple very recently, launched their own kind of self-repair kits, which, as Mikah would attest, is Apple promising that, hey, you can get this kit, you can do it all yourself. That doesn't necessarily mean any of it's easy or convenient necessarily. And so I don't know, it just kind of occurs to me right now that, some of these changes kind of play into potentially making that service, making what you guys do more viable for more people as a result, right?
Potentially, yeah, potentially. As you said rightly yourself, using Apple's service tools is not, I wouldn't say it's not easy, but it's not practical. The size of the equipment is not, it's not a reasonable way to repair a phone. But it's good to have the option. I mean, the more choices you have in your means of repairing your devices is only a good thing. And you can choose our stuff, you can choose their stuff, whatever works for you.
Absolutely. Totally agree. Okay, so then let's kind of turn our attention on the bigger devices, let's say, the iPhone 14 Pro, the Pro Max. And when I think of Pro or Max or Plus devices or whatever, I think of everything you got in the vanilla and more. But in this case, right. But in this case, it really seems like they're not cut from the same cloth. They're actually very different. And actually the Pro and the Pro Max are a little bit more traditional design. So what exactly, did your team find here? And were you surprised at what you found?
I think the Pro and Pro Max were run-of-the-mill Apple architecture. It was not surprising for us. It's only surprising in that it's not different from past generations of phones. It's what we expected to see,
Right.
had it not been for the base model iPhone 14. It's also understandable why they did this. You have to understand the iPhone is a huge product globally. It represents something like 25% of global cell phone sales. In the US, it's a huge seller. It represents a large investment. It affects any changes to these phones affects Apple's bottom line, and it makes investors nervous. So it only makes sense to make incremental changes, and it only makes sense to make the big changes in your least popular device, the device that is least likely to affect your bottom line if things should go wrong. And from that perspective, it makes perfect business sense for them to make the major change in the iPhone 14 base model and perform the incremental changes in the other models. I think for the most part, people have been interested about have been enamored with this dynamic island feature, which is mostly a software feature. There is a hardware change there. They did, in order to make the pill shape camera setup in the screen, they had to move some of the sensors a little lower, and we've seen the patents for this. There's some sort of projector mechanism that allows for the infrared, and I believe it's the LiDAR sensor that has been moved slightly below the rest of the assembly in that pill to allow for this to be compacted as much as it has been. So that is a change. That is a hardware change. And obviously we've got the satellite and SOS messaging in there as well.
Yeah, indeed. And there is this kind of all-in dedication to the eSIM, which essentially, at least here in the US, eliminates the need for the SIM tray. I guess I was a little surprised to find that because when I think of that, I think of, just think about all of the other things Apple can do with that space or with that space inside of the design, and not just Apple, anyone that, like this happened in Android as well as Apple devices removing the headphone port. And a lot of the times they would say, well, if we remove that, then that gives us more flexibility to do other things and blah, blah, blah. And it was hard to tell whether that was just like passive justification to get you on board with it, or if that actually was the case. Here, the SIM tray was filled with like a little plastic spacer. So there was really nothing of any importance kind of put into that place in its swap out. Kind of surprising to me.
Absolutely. It was surprising for us too. This is the plastic spacer. It weighs about 1 gram. And this is the Pro Max logic board. That's where the SIM module should be sitting, and it's just an empty space. I don't think it's something. It depends on who you ask. It's not something we can really say is a very bad thing. It's not good. It's not bad. The one thing you will see on the internet, a lot of people are commenting. They're saying, "Well, it's only the US version. Everybody else gets a SIM card," but they're missing the fact that the US represents a market larger than Russia, the CSTO countries, and Europe combined. It is a huge, huge market. To ignore such a large market is unusual, especially when you consider that they make 4 different types of this board. There's one for the Chinese market, one for the Russian CSTO markets, a global version, and a US version. There's 4 different versions. They could have put something else, like a micro SD card reader, for example. So you can make better use of that 8K camera function, because that's going to chew up some space.
Yeah, I just can't see Apple putting a micro SD slot into the phone. That would be neat. I mean, I would applaud that, but I just can't see Apple doing that.
No, they're making too much money.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, and what does that do? That kind of puts the consumer into the position when they buy the phone to decide, actually, I'm going to pony up and get the larger storage space because I don't have any other choice, right? Exactly. Or up their cloud storage for, so Apple gets the services money there as well. If people want to learn more about their right to repair and all of this information, you told me in an email about a site. Where do you want to point people to so that they can find information about all this stuff?
Well, we talk a lot about repair and how people get can get involved on our blog. So if you check out our website, check out our blog in particular, you can find a lot of information there, but also repair.org. If you want to get involved, if you want to influence the kind of changes that we're advocating for, repair.org is the place to go.
Right on. Shahram Mokhtari from iFixit, thank you so much for hopping on today and telling us all about what I think a lot of people who watch and listen to this show think would be actually a pretty fun job, tearing apart technology and gadgets like you do. Yeah. So thanks for doing what you do, and thanks for talking all about it on the show today.
My genuine pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. We're going to take a quick break before we come back to talk about a virtual version, a digital version, an online version of that elevator close button. Does it actually work? I don't know. We'll find out. There's a little tease while we take a quick break so I can tell you about ClickUp, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. So just spend a second here thinking about having one extra day a week. More time to cook healthy meals, perhaps work on a novel you've been writing, or maybe just binging some good reality TV. For me, I would spend that one extra day a week sleeping as much as humanly possible. Love to sleep, and if I had an extra day a week, that's what I'd do with it. It's all possible now with ClickUp, the productivity platform that will save you one day a week on work, and it's guaranteed. ClickUp began with the premise that productivity was broken. All these different apps that have all of these different tools and features that you're all trying to keep track of. And that starts to add up as you're going from one ecosystem to another, signing into one service, signing into another service, et cetera, et cetera. It takes up so much of your time. So what would happen if we could improve that productivity and make it so that everything is where it needs to be? ClickUp is the one tool to house all your tasks, all your projects, all your docs, all your goals, all your spreadsheets, and more. ClickUp is built for teams from one, yes, as small as one person, to 1,000 or more. Very great that you can size it based on what you need. It's packed with features and customization options that no other productivity tool has, so you can work the way you work best. Whether you're in project management, engineering, sales, marketing, HR, ClickUp has easy-to-use solutions that create a more efficient work environment. So why not join more than 800,000 highly productive teams using ClickUp today? All you have to do is use code TNW to get 15% off ClickUp's massive unlimited plan for a year, meaning you can start reclaiming your time for under $5 a month. Sign up today at clickup.com and use the code TNW. But hurry, because this offer ends soon. Thank you, ClickUp, for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, we are back from the break, and just recently I saw this piece fly by from the Mozilla Foundation about, and as I said before the break, an online version of what I consider the elevator door close button, where we go, I'm pressing it, but I don't know if it's actually listening to what I'm saying. And it turns out that the same thing may apply to YouTube's feedback buttons. Joining us today to talk about the research regarding the YouTube feedback buttons and their efficacy is Becca Ricks, senior researcher at Mozilla, who is here with us. Thank you for joining us, Becca.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to get you here. I would like to start out by having kind of a quick definition and explanation, if you will, for folks who might not understand, because I think we make at times a lot of jokes about, oh, the algo is failing me, or the TikTok algorithm, or this or that. When someone was referring to the YouTube algorithm, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so when we're talking about the YouTube algorithm, often what we're referring to is actually YouTube's recommendation system. So, when you go to the YouTube homepage and you see a panel of videos recommended to you that might be based on previous things you've searched for, interests you've had, that's sort of the recommendation algorithm at work. And you can also see it when you watch a video. There are often recommendations on the side, also based on stuff that you've seen before. And we know a little bit about how that recommender system works because YouTube has given some information about what signals go into it. So we know that things like clicks how long you're watching a video, how often you're sharing it, whether you like it, are all signals that YouTube is looking at to personalize your recommendations.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Now we've got that explained. I'd love to kind of dig into this research, because now we can talk about, in reading about this, I was so curious what led to kind of looking into this, because, by default, you might not consider that these buttons may not be working as you expect, or that the feedback you're giving is as expected. But when you start asking around, then it turns out, oh, we're all having similar experiences, and suddenly it's a conspiracy. So tell us, what inspired the Mozilla Foundation to look into the effectiveness of YouTube's feedback buttons?
Yeah, so we started looking into YouTube a couple of years ago because we were hearing from some of our supporters that they were having really strange experiences with the recommender system. And we actually developed a tool called Regrets Reporter, which is a browser extension that allows people to actually donate their data about YouTube to us that we can analyze, so that we can actually look at how real people are experiencing the platform. And a previous report that we had written about the platform looked at what kinds of content were being recommended to people that they considered harmful. So last year we put out a report where we were really looking at some of the videos people quote unquote regretted. So that was things like harmful misinformation, scams, spam, all the clickbait that I think a lot of us who use YouTube are quite familiar with. And in response to that, YouTube has been a little bit more transparent about how people can take steps to try to control their recommendations. So they released this blog post that basically walks you through a couple of the controls you can use. And we've also heard from them over the past couple of years that they're moving away from looking at signals like watch time or engagement. So basically measures of like, are you just like watching video after video after video, and more towards something called user satisfaction or user well-being. And so we really just wanted to see if that was true, if they were weighting some of those signals around people's health and satisfaction more than some of those other signals around engagement, which actually align really well with their business model. And so what we decided to do is that we worked with almost 23,000 people who donated their data to us through our Regrets Reporter browser extension to really look at how they were interacting with some of these feedback tools. So those are things like the dislike button or the do not recommend channel button, to really look at what happened to your recommendations after you use those buttons.
Understood. And now we can talk about the outcome of that research in looking into the data that you got that was donated through that Regrets Reporter extension. What did the Mozilla Foundation find?
Yeah, so in the research, we decided we were going to do a little bit of qualitative research as well as this big quantitative study. And so first, what we really looked at was people's attitudes and their feelings of control around their recommendations. So we ran a survey, we conducted interviews where we really dug into some of the tactics that people were using in an attempt to try to control their recommendations. And so we really learned that in general, people use kind of like a trial and error approach to their recommendations. So, people were using the do not recommend this channel button, but they were also using like privacy VPNs, or, a number of people said they would log out of their account, watch a video that they knew would mess up their recommendations, and then log back in. So people kind of engaged in all different kinds of behaviors because they felt like these controls didn't always work, or they didn't really understand how they worked. So what that really showed us was that people are just not totally confident that using these controls work. And we actually found that almost 40% of our respondents said that they felt that their actions had no effect at all on what they were being recommended, which we thought was really interesting. And then what was great is we could then run this quantitative study where we could actually look at whether those feelings and impressions were true, like actually borne out in the data. And so what we did find is that we tested 4 different buttons. We used the dislike button, the not interested button, the do not recommend channel, and then remove from watch history, we tested those 4 to look at how it affected your recommendations. And across the board, we found that they were not effective tools for preventing unwanted recommendations. The most effective of all of those was do not recommend channel, which prevented 43% of unwanted recommendations. And the lowest was the dislike button, which only prevented 11%. So what that indicated to us is that these tools are somewhat effective at preventing people from seeing stuff they don't want to see. But by and large, it's probably the case that YouTube is weighting other signals like engagement or the popularity of the video maybe more heavily than other signals like user feedback.
Mm-hmm. I want to say, I feel I've observed that a lot of times qualitative measurements are often given a lower rung of importance to quantitative measurements, particularly in rigorous scientific studies and in research. And when it comes to something like this, I'm so glad that you all made this part of the study that you did, because not only were you then able to compare the two and look at what people thought versus what was actually happening, but just knowing what people thought. If I can sort of paraphrase one of my favorite reality TV shows, in Survivor, they talk about how reality is perception. And so it regardless of what is actually happening, the way that something is being perceived is what is kind of the truth in that moment. And so it was interesting to look through this study and see that folks genuinely felt like those buttons didn't really do anything for them. And especially when it came to the thumbs down button, that seemed to be the case in many cases. And I want to ask you too, I didn't originally include this in the questions, but I wanted to know a little bit more about the regrets reporter, because when I had first read through this, the press release and through the study, I didn't realize that this was an extension that is kind of a tool that folks can use. It's not just a research gathering tool that folks who wanted to be part of this research campaign were using. Can you talk actually just a little bit about the regrets reporter, and then which browsers support it and where folks could go to get that?
Yeah, for sure. So regrets reporter was developed about 2 years ago as both a research tool and a tool that people can use to just more quickly send a negative feedback signal to YouTube. So it's a way for people to sort of use some of those tools that YouTube offers by offering a layer on top of it. But then also people can opt into some of these studies. And, we're in a really unique situation that I think a lot of other researchers aren't in, because we have access to this massive, engaged, grassroots community of people who are really excited to be able to share their data with us, obviously in a privacy-preserving way, in order to be able to run these kinds of studies. So you can download the browser extension in both Firefox and Chrome, and you can find that by searching in the Chrome and Firefox extension stores.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. And then one of the, of course, biggest things that I'm curious about is anytime you do one of these studies, there are some big kind of highlights or trends or outcomes that inevitably show up. Anything that surprised you, anything that particularly stuck out, to you that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think I was particularly struck by some of the ways that the qualitative and quantitative research, which were kind of separate studies to some degree, actually some of the findings from that research really reinforced one another, which I think to your earlier point shows why doing this kind of mixed methods research is really important. So for instance, we learned in our survey data that a lot of people said, for example, when they used the don't recommend channel button, they felt like it was relatively useful for blocking recommendations from a specific channel, but that they felt they continued to get recommended similar videos from other channels. And when we looked at our regrets reporter data, we saw the exact same dynamic in terms of the effectiveness of that button. And I think what that indicates to me is that people aren't totally clear on whether, when I use this, is this like a vague expression of preference where I'm like, I sort of don't like this, maybe don't recommend it, or whether it was an instruction like, absolutely block this, blacklist this, don't use this. So to me, that indicates that there's a lot that YouTube could be doing around education, but also just developing better tools that put people back in the driver's seat. So I think that was really interesting. And then I think the other big insight we had was just about how YouTube approaches, how it infers your preferences. So right now, the model it operates off of is essentially a lot of passive data collection. So it's basically watching what you do when it really could be asking you what you want to watch on the platform. And so much of the platform is really powered by that passive data collection. And we think, there could be opportunities for people to more proactively state what their preferences are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that's kind of how I wanted to round things out is particularly for Google/YouTube, just in general, especially given what you said earlier about how the company indicated that they were shifting the way that they looked at the ranking system and the recommendation system, given that it would appear perhaps based on the data behind the scenes, there's not much of a change. Do you think that is a change that's still in the works? And is there anything that YouTube and Google can do to improve upon this? And perhaps even if the quantitative data doesn't bear out, the fact that so many people feel like those buttons don't do anything, is the damage just done? Or is there a way to kind of return to a trust in the way that this works?
Yeah. So something we know about these tools is that it's really important that they work well and they're not just sort of placebos, because if you have them there just to make people feel like they're in control, but then they don't actually work, people tend to lose a lot of trust in the platform. And I think we've kind of reached that point with YouTube where people are like, I don't really know if I actually have control. We definitely at a minimum recommend that there's a lot more YouTube could be doing around like making those controls easier to understand and access. So like I mentioned, we learned that like people are frustrated. They don't know if they're using do not recommend channel. Is it going to prevent similar recommendations? Like what is it actually doing? So I think there could be a lot of clarity around that, and they could really think about the actual user experience here. But then I think on a higher level, as I mentioned before, there's an opportunity for YouTube to really reimagine how it thinks about user feedback so that it's not just sort of one signal weighted like maybe not as heavily as other signals, but is treated as maybe the most important signal in folks determining what they want to watch. And I think they also have an opportunity to really think about what would it look like for people to actively state what their preferences are and actively curate versus passive data collection. Because I think the model right now is somewhat paternalistic, where you have a platform that's kind of passively inferring what it thinks you might want to watch versus you telling the platform, this is what I want to be able to do on the platform. And I think it actually would be a win-win for both users and the platform itself, because people would want to use the platform more if it actually worked effectively.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about this study. Of course, folks can head over to the Mozilla Foundation website, even just by going to mozilla.org. But are you available online if folks want to follow the work that you're doing?
Yes. So you can find me at Twitter at Becca Ricks, where I have been posting about some of this work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Coming up next, the big tech companies going toe-to-toe with high-end VR headsets. And actually, are you really surprised that they're all battling each other on this battlefront? This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Infrascale. The statistics for ransomware attacks are alarming, of course. Cybersecurity and cyber criminals can actually penetrate up to 93% of company networks. That's according to betanews.com. And it's not just large organizations either. 46% of small to medium-sized businesses have actually been victims of ransomware attacks. Now, the Infrascale cloud backup solution provides the security that you actually need to manage backups and secures them from hackers or adverse events. That way you can, sleep easier at night, knowing that your company will never have to pay a ransom. Wouldn't that be nice? You can back up and protect SaaS applications, endpoints, and servers as well as being able to execute disaster recovery on site or in the cloud. Now, every company needs a secure endpoint data protection solution that's easy to install and easy to manage. And Infrascale actually offers this. They integrate with Hyper-V and VMware. That enables site-to-site failover with orchestration in the Infrascale cloud. And you can keep hackers away. Immutability really is at the core of how their product is designed. Your data is, of course, encrypted, even in storage, so no one can alter it. With Infrascale backup and disaster recovery, you're going to be ready for whatever comes your way, whether it's a server crash, maybe it's human error, malicious activity, a natural disaster, whatever it may be. According to Gartner, the average cost of downtime caused by a local or site-wide incident across all industry sectors is actually $5,600 per minute. That comes out to $330,000 per hour. Yikes. Clients and partners alike, including MSPs and VARs, trust Infrascale backup and recovery solutions to help keep their business running, to eliminate downtime and data loss with the most cost-effective enterprise-grade data protection solutions. More than 65,000 companies, in fact, are protected by Infrascale. If disaster strikes, your applications, data, your systems are recovered and available in record time. Their award-winning world-class support is there to ensure your business is protected 24/7, now also with SSD at no extra charge. So whatever your data, whatever your environment, Infrascale provides continuity and resiliency for your business. All you got to do is visit infrascale.com/twit. Do that, go there, and you can sign up for a free demo and see how Infrascale protects your business today. That's infrascale.com/twit. And we thank Infrascale for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, so I saw this news a little bit ago, and it kind of piqued my interest. Mikah, you have a MetaQuest 2. I have a MetaQuest 2. Right now, when it comes to that price category, and by the way, Meta very recently raised the price of the MetaQuest 2 to $400, so making it less affordable, but still kind of in the range of affordability, I suppose, when you're talking about, the next generation kind of VR hardware. Without going all in on like a major kind of VR computer system to back it up. So Meta has its MetaQuest 2. It's really kind of the go-to for that price category. It's become the easy thing for people to recommend as long as you can get over the hooks that Meta has into it. But this news actually kind of shows that, big tech kind of follows in its own small and exclusive club. They're all chasing the same things, right? ByteDance, who's the parent company of TikTok, just revealed this morning the Pico Headset. And it really seems to be a direct competitor to the MetaQuest 2 when you're talking about this kind of level of VR, this self-contained VR headset level of VR. It has inside-out cameras, of course. It's powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2, 8 gigs of RAM. It has 2160 by 2160 pixels per eye. So that's not bad. 128 to 256 gig storage options. Basically, most of what I'm reading here sounds very, very similar to what we have with the MetaQuest 2. Pricing for this ranges from 429 euros if you're getting the 128 gig storage model to 499 euros if you're getting the larger 256 gig storage model. What you do get here that you don't get with the MetaQuest right out of the box is, if you can see that headset there, the strap that goes around your head on the back of it is the battery. I don't know if that's the only battery, but that's a battery pack. And ultimately what that does, obviously that allows, to extend the life of this without having to plug it in and charge it as often, but it also distributes the weight. And that's definitely a complaint that I've had about the MetaQuest 2 is, it's an accessory that you can get to get that added battery. And I think the battery does place itself on the back if you buy that, but that's an added cost. Here, it's kind of part of the hardware. So, and then you can see the controllers there. All these controllers end up seeming pretty familiar, but different enough to have their own kind of style and flair. Now, the thing about the Pico 4 is it's not set to ship in the US. I don't know if that's like for good or just for now, but right now it's launching in several European and Asian countries. Pre-orders in October, shipping October 18th. So the hardware itself, when you compare apples to apples, looks very similar to what Meta has with the Meta Quest 2. But this is in light or in comparison to what we're expecting next month from Meta. And we've known about a device coming from Meta that they're working on called the Cambria. I think the Cambria might be the kind of the whatever the in development name. I don't know if that's the official name for the hardware
like the
once
code
it
name.
launches. Yeah, the code name, exactly. But the Cambria is going to be a really big step up. I'm super curious about this. So the Pico 4 headset isn't meant to compete with this because it's actually the Cambria device offers more. It will, and actually we're not going to wait very long, by the way, to see this. Meta Connect is on October 11th. And from what I understand, it's almost a certainty that we're going to see this. Mark Zuckerberg has already teased in the past that the newer kind of upgraded Quest hardware will be seen in October. And then you've got this event in October where they usually introduce hardware. So it's almost a guarantee that we're going to see it. But what does it offer? It offers eye tracking. It offers facial tracking. So these are things, that are a step up from what we're used to on this consumer level VR right now. If you can imagine being in a VR experience and having eye tracking with the person that you're talking to, instead of that just being kind of like, kind of ghost-like, very generic, eyes fixed forward, facing wherever the face happens to be facing. Now you might have the possibility of having a more realistic eye contact experience, that sort of thing. Facial tracking could potentially, I don't know how they do that effectively, but obviously they've figured out a system so that avatars in VR aren't just, randomized between smile and, oh, you're talking, so we'll do a mouth open animation, that sort of thing.
Right.
Maybe these things can be a little bit more realistic and really kind of increase the realism of the whole experience. And that's not to mention the higher resolution screen, which personally I feel like is a really important part. I know some people feel like that's less important than other things.
I so disagree. I think it's incredibly important. I'm with you because that is the difference. I think there are two things that are the difference for people who get sick in VR. One is the frame rate or refresh rate, and the other is the resolution of the screen. The higher the resolution you can get and the better the refresh rate you can get, the less likely you are to feel ill while you are using the device. So 1,000%, I think that's so incredibly important. And I would even say, stop trying to do all of those other features until you get this perfect, because that is the thing that's going to keep people from wanting to be part of, a longer term VR experience. Is if every time they use it, they get ill. That's not, that's
sure
not great.
And it really only takes a couple of those experiences for you to be like, yeah, I've tried VR, I don't like it. And then you don't try it forever, if ever. So yeah, I totally agree. Now this Cambria device, from my understanding, more geared towards pro users, also kind of meant maybe more for business, because this thing's apparently going to be a lot more expensive than the $400 price point that we're used to right now. It's also going to have a mixed reality capabilities. So it's not just going to be all entirely within the goggle. There will be a little bit of handoff and interplay between what's in the room versus in the goggle. And so super curious to see how that all develops. But, again, going back to Pico, which they have a pro version of the Pico 4 that is rumored and has been known about for a while now. Actually, when Pico announced earlier this week that they would be making an announcement about new hardware, people who knew, were following this closely, kind of expected that there would be the Pico 4 and the Pico 4 Pro announced. But with Oculus having their new hardware next month, maybe Pico has a different plan to reveal their kind of competitor to that after the fact. I don't know if that does them any favors, or maybe there's a technological reason, but essentially this pro version of the Pico 4 would I mean, at least with the limited information that we have right now, go somewhat toe-to-toe on features. It will have eye tracking. It'll have facial tracking. I don't know about the mixed reality kind of use case of it, but it'll definitely be much more expensive, focusing on enterprise users, focusing on those pro users. So I think what kind of struck me about this is just kind of yet again realizing that like these big tech companies are actually playing in a very limited kind of pool together. It's like they're all, so often we're talking about social media and this one, this company does this thing and then, like Be Real, for example, and then suddenly everybody has their Be Real, or Clubhouse, and then suddenly everybody has their Clubhouse. It's but it's all kind of interplayed within this small group that just kind of tosses the ball back and forth. And I think we're starting to see that in VR. Of course, VR is a little bit different because there aren't a whole lot of players creating hardware for VR of this scale, of this potential scale anyways. Meta really blows that out of the water. But a company like ByteDance, powering TikTok, I could see, and TikTok just on having so much momentum right now, could be really interesting. And that's not even considering Apple, which is somewhere right around the corner. I don't know. Do you know, like, are you aware of the latest machinations there? Is this like next year that we might see an Apple VR, or no one knows for sure?
Probably next year. Yeah, we don't know for sure. It could be next year. I think the first introduction could possibly be at WWDC, which happens in the summer of 2023. But who knows? Because Apple is reportedly working on both a VR and an AR headset, and potentially a mixed reality device as well. And so what gets released when and what is the final product or final products is all up in the air. And I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But eventually Apple will have a VR/AR headset as part of the market.
And that's going to be a pricey affair as well.
Yes.
And of course, Apple doing what it's done so many times, where it comes in later than, let's say, competitors doing something, but in the magical way that Apple is able to do it, they're able to use that time to create a product that when they come out really seems like, okay, I know you're coming late, but you're really bringing it when you come. And it can often be kind of like a defining moment for that particular hardware category. So I could totally see Apple doing that as well. But I think this kind of paves the way, and that's going to be incredibly expensive from what we understand. These are going to be pretty pricey. So it kind of seems like these different levels of VR are starting to become a little clearer, as far as like, okay, $450 has been the norm for most people. And maybe, I'm sure that will continue to be a price point that people can buy into. But the really exciting stuff for this, because this is, it's a new technology, well, new in air quotes, but it's a new technology with momentum right now that really stands to benefit from that premium experience in really interesting ways. And so I'm curious to kind of see how this like upper echelon of VR actually defines the category, and if this can kind of move that momentum along. And I, love agree or disagree, but Apple is really good at creating that momentum when they finally decide to enter in. So I see that happening too. But yeah, so there you go. Pico hardware. I don't know if we're going to see, Pico has released some VR hardware in the US. They've actually been around since 2015. So they've been doing VR longer than Meta has, when you consider that. They were acquired by ByteDance last year. So with ByteDance backing, super curious to see kind of where Pico resides in this realm, and if some of this hardware comes in a larger scale to the US, which is something that Meta has got totally buttoned down, being able to bring its hardware pretty much anywhere. Can Pico do the same with ByteDance? Remains to be seen. But there we go.
Shall see. All right. Up next is my story of the week, going back into AI and large language models. that may not be the term now that I'm thinking about it. In any case, they are language models that are gigantic. Before we do that, though, I want to take a quick break so I can tell you about ZipRecruiter, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. You know it, we know it. Hiring is challenging. Luckily, there's one place where finding qualified candidates is easy. That's ziprecruiter.com/TNW. In fact, just recently, we were able to hire someone from ZipRecruiter as we had a spot open and needed it filled. And our new member of the continuity team is fantastic. And ZipRecruiter, thank you for helping make that happen. Hiring for a business while also running a business is a difficult thing to do. You already are trying to focus on the day-to-day, but now you need somebody, and to try and sort of split attention like that can be very complicated. So let ZipRecruiter handle it for you. It does the work for you. Its powerful technology finds and matches the right candidates with your job. You can easily review recommended candidates and invite your top choices to apply. That often leads to a quick response because they go, oh, They want me to apply to the job. That's great. I'm hopping right on that. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And ZipRecruiter is the #1 rated hiring site based on the G2 satisfaction ratings as of January 1st, 2022. Try ZipRecruiter for free today at ziprecruiter.com/TNW. That's ziprecruiter.com/TNW. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. All right, I am super into AI stuff as of late, and there was a new report out about, it's an MIT technology review, about Google's DeepMind and a chatbot that they're working on. So in typical chatbot speak, these systems are backed by it is large language models. Yay. Okay. I got the term correct. I was doubting myself and I shouldn't have. They use large language models, which essentially pull in a bunch of text from all over and use it to kind of inform the system how humans talk, how they interact, how they respond. And so I showed off in Google's AI test kitchen, I think that was a couple weeks ago, an example of one of Google's systems, Lambda, at work, where I could give it a prompt and it would talk back to me. And of course, there was the whole situation where an engineer claimed that the chatbot was sentient, and it was not. But that led to a whole history of stories. And so with all of that comes this kind of ongoing conversation that we have about planning and preparing for the impact of these technologies. Because as I've said before on the show, it seems like a lot of the time there's this rush to make cool stuff happen. And it's only after that we see the impact that the technology has and see the potential negative impact that the technology has. And then we try to fix it in post. And this is not one of the situations where fixing it in post is just a reasonable action. So Google's DeepMind is working with the large language model called Chinchilla. I love all of these different names. We've got DeepMind, Chinchilla, and what the new tool is called is Sparrow. That is the chatbot. And Sparrow, its purpose is to answer questions that people ask and use Google search to provide more information that the person would need, and also to use Google search to actually answer the question. So think about right now, if I were to go on to google.com and type in how to make a bundt cake, likely at the top, there will either be a YouTube video where a portion of the video is highlighted and it shows this is how you make a bundt cake, or in this case, it shows you recipes for bundt cake, and you can click on one of those and pop it open real easy and see how to make a bundt cake. What what Sparrow is aimed at doing is kind of being the answer to those questions in a way that feels a little bit more personable. So I could ask that, and instead of sort of seeing a bunch of different links and finding one myself, then it could, in theory, do a better job of saying, this recipe for a bundt cake seems to be getting a lot of attention. Here's how you go about making a bundt cake. And what is unique about this system is that Chinchilla, as the large language model behind Sparrow, of course, has lots of data that may include some questionable responses, or including, if you were to ask it if it's a person, it could respond, yes, I'm a person. Sparrow is aimed at not doing that. First, there are 23 rules that the researchers and developers working on Sparrow have sort of built into this tool. Can't offer financial advice. It cannot make threatening statements. It can't claim to be a person. And then many others. Those are just 3, so 20 other rules. And when it answers with multiple responses and lets the human being who is using the system choose which answer they feel is the best one. And so by combining the AI and large language model that is, of course, based on human response with actual human rating and response to what the system is saying, the hope, the theory, the hypothesis is that this will improve upon the responses that the artificial intelligence chatbot provides. Of course, with this, you are working with a group of people that you hope you can trust to answer and rate appropriately. And that's always something that has to be considered. And of course, this is not the be all end all, but one researcher at Hugging Face, which is an AI startup, said about Sparrow, it's, quote, a nice next step that follows a general trend in AI where we are more seriously trying to improve the safety aspects of large language model deployments. Of course, the system still does make mistakes, including going off topic, making up random answers that aren't actual answers to questions. And in the MIT Technology Review piece, it says, determined participants were also able to make the model break rules 8% of the time. Older models broke rules 3 times more often than Sparrow has. So it is quite an improvement to see it not break the rules all that often, but it is still able to break the rules. And so that is, of course, of concern. I just find all of this fascinating from the perspective of it's so interesting how humans create the AI and then the AI does its thing and it answers to a human being, and the human being then improves upon the AI by saying this was good, this was bad, but the AI the whole time is mimicking human behavior. And so there's so much humanity involved in artificial intelligence, particularly whenever it comes to language learning models. And I find that so fascinating, the way that all kind of works together.
I think what I get from what you just said, and whether this is what you meant or not, but this is kind of what it pops into my brain, is that when AI misbehaves, it's actually a kind of a reflection of how humans misbehave, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's pulling from that language model. And so
we get surprised when AI does that, but it's actually not surprising at all. It was created by humans. It's based on data fed to it by humans, chosen by humans. That data is created by humans. So of course, like if an AI ends up, going down a bad path, it's probably because we set it down that path, whether we realized it or not.
Yeah, it is a reflection of humanity. It's a looking glass, a pool.
Absolutely.
We stare into the AI void, and it stares back at us and says, "I am you.
I am you. Look, don't get down on me, man.
Yeah,
you made me.
Not my fault." And so, I think that this specific kind of language model and chatbot is incredibly compelling to me because I can so clearly see how this can be implemented as a future technology on improving our voice assistants and on improving even our searches that we do online. Being able to just have a system understand what we mean when we ask a question, where we don't have to meet it more on its playing field, like you have to do with the art AI stuff that we have right now. You do have to meet those systems. You have to meet OpenAI's DALL-E 2 on its playing field in terms of using the proper terms and knowing what some keywords will do. The same thing goes for DeepMind. Wait, DeepMind? Is that what it's called? No. I can't think of the Discord one.
Why am I
Midjourney?
Midjourney. There you go.
Yeah. All of those, there's a specific way to talk to those systems.
Yeah, syntax,
Yeah, and so if you can break out of that when it comes to our virtual assistants, which we also have to talk to in kind of a specific way, I think that's going to be great, and there will be improvement there. So it's just all about, I'm glad that there's this balance that is being more paid attention to than I've seen in the past in terms of making sure that to the best of our ability, they don't reflect the bad parts of humanity, and that they do their job and they do it well and they do it kindly and don't, result in horrible responses that may break our hearts.
I think the one thing that's popping into my mind right now, and actually, I don't know if you would remember or even know about this ad campaign. I think it was from, so it was from the late 80s. It was a drug-free America campaign. And it has the quote, "Who taught you how to do this stuff? You all right? I learned it from watching you." And it was the father, walks in and discovers that the son has has some marijuana or something like that.
So that's where that came from. I learned it from watching you came from that.
Yes.
I know that quote. I learned it from watching you, but I never knew
learned
that's
it from
what
watching you. Yes, it was an anti-drug kind of campaign that at that time was everywhere, and it was comical, and that's why it kind of has stayed in the stayed around and been memed and everything. But it just kind of AI kind of reminds me of that. Like when we're really surprised that AI is going down this bad road, it's like, where did you learn this stuff, AI? You all right? I learned it by watching you. That's exactly it.
Wow, it all comes back around.
There you go. I'll send you the ad after we're done, and you can watch it. You'll get a good laugh. But we have reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. You don't want to miss it. Every Thursday we do this show. If you go to twit.tv/TNW, you can find all the ways to subscribe so you don't miss it. And we appreciate that.
Yeah, you know what else we appreciate? Those of you who join Club TWiT, because when you do that, you are supporting us directly. Club TWiT is an awesome place with awesome friends and awesome stuff you get as part of the club. For $7 a month or $84 a year, you can join Club TWiT at twit.tv/clubtwit. When you do, you get access to all of our shows with no ads. So it's just the content without those interruptions. You get access to the TWiT Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else, before the show, after the show, behind the scenes, etc. And access to the Club TWiT Discord server, a fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club TWiT members and those of us here at TWiT. Along with that, you will also gain access to my show, Hands on Mac, which is a short format show all about making the most of the devices you have on hand, the Apple devices you have on hand. So that's the Mac, that's iPhone, iPad, etc., as well as Paul Thurrott's Hands on Windows. That is the Windows tips and tricks show with lots of great stuff for making the most of that Windows PC you're rocking. So check that out. twit.tv/clubtwit. Again, $7 a year, $7 a month, $84 a year. And we appreciate your support. Thank you. If you would like to follow me online, I'm at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or you can head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. You can check me out later today, if you're a subscriber, to for Hands on Mac, or later this week for the Tech Guy radio show on Saturdays, which I co-host with Leo Laporte, the radio show heard around the world where we take your tech questions and do our best to answer them, or on Tuesdays for iOS Today, which I record with my pal Rosemary Orchard, where we talk all things iOS, tvOS, HomePodOS, etc. Jason Howell, what about you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Jason Howell. You can find me talking all about Android on All About Android. That's why we called it All About Android. Twit.tv/AAA. We do that every Tuesday evening and have a lot of fun with that. And yeah, so much more behind the scenes doing a lot of Leo shows, as you are as well, Mikah. So if you're seeing his shows, sometimes you're seeing our work as well. I mean, producing from behind the scenes. That's what we're doing there. Anyways, thank you for watching. Thank you to John Ashley in the studio for pushing the buttons and making the show happen there. Thank you to Burke for all of the help that he provides behind the scenes, making sure our guests are ready for the show and all that. And thank you to you for watching and listening. We would not have a show if it weren't for you. So thank you for doing that. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of AdAster Magazine, and each week I join with my co-host to bring you This Week in Space, the latest and greatest news from the final frontier. We talk to NASA chiefs, space scientists, engineers, educators, and artists, and sometimes we just shoot the breeze over what's hot and what's not in space, books, and TV. And we do it all for you, our fellow true believers. So whether you're an armchair adventurer or waiting for your turn to grab a slot in Elon's Mars rocket, join us on This Week in Space and be part of the greatest adventure of all time.